Je te souhaite la bienvenue sur mon podcast Off the Mat. Mon intention est de te partager ici les clés précieuses que j'ai reçues du yoga pour apprendre à m'aimer, reprendre confiance en moi, cultiver mon équilibre et ma paix intérieure chaque jour. Je te souhaite la bienvenue chez toi. Welcome, Shawna. Really excited to have you on the podcast today. You are my very first episode in English, but also first guest that I'm having on the podcast. I'm really excited to have you join in.
I can't believe I'm here for both first guest and first episode in English. That is an honor. So thank you for the trust and for inviting me. And it was really sweet getting to interview you and having you on the show. And so I know that today's conversation will be beautiful.
So to give to our audience a little bit of backstory of how we met, we never really met in person actually. We met through Shawna's podcast, which is Yoga and Leadership. I think that's the name.
Leadership and yoga, but same, same.
That works. But we'll get into this. Like, she'll talk to us about like her podcast, how she got started, and all of the things. But basically, Shawna reached out to me on Instagram. It was like, I think in September or a little bit prior to that. And I was traveling to New York at the time, and I got interviewed. I'll link actually the episode in the description of this episode, so that you guys can listen or re-listen if you want to. And basically, she made an interview about like my journey and how I got started and everything yoga and poetry and all of the things. So it was such a nice conversation that we had. And then this time, I wanted to have Shawna coming into the podcast to speak about online business leadership in the wellness area, because I know that a lot of you that are listening are yoga teachers, fitness coach, wellness coach, and Shawna is such an inspiring woman. She does a lot of handstands as well. She's an entrepreneur. She has her own podcast. And I really want you, Shawna, now to introduce yourself with your own words and to explain to our audience what you do and who you are.
Thank you for that really kind introduction, first and foremost. So, in few words, I feel like maybe it makes most sense for me to share kind of my mission because there's a lot going on behind the scenes about teaching rocket yoga, teaching progressive Ashtanga yoga and handstands and podcasting and all of this. But really, at the end of the day, I'm really big into inspiration and motivation and giving people, and myself included, because I get a lot of energy from sharing these kind of things, but giving people energy and kind of being that catalyst or that spark that says that you can do what you want to do or that your dreams are made for people like you. They're not reserved for somebody that you perceive to be older or wiser or younger or healthier or wealthier, any of those sort of things. Like your dreams are really made for people like you. And it's really possible for you to go after them because for a long time, I sat with a lot of that doubt myself of like, oh, who am I to start a podcast if I have a fear of public speaking, or who am I to start yoga if I can't touch my toes in a forward fold, So, that's really my mission and what I'm here to bring, but I would say that my true north and what I spend my most time on is definitely the Leadership and Yoga podcast.
But I know a lot of people experience that. How do you like imposter syndrome? Do you call that the same in English? Of where like you absolutely want to do something, you have the call to do it, but something is holding you back. How did you get through this to actually get started? Is that like the fire, like the passion that you were like cultivating within that really helped you to get started, or how did you this whole started?
So I feel like I would have had a totally different answer to this about, even like a year and a half to 2 years ago than I do now, because I do think that imposter syndrome is a real thing, but sometimes I also think that we aren't quite ready yet, and that's okay as well. There's a big sort of attention draw right now to the fact that a lot of us spend our entire lives never feeling ready, and that's true. But I also think sometimes, in my case at least, like I've pushed myself to kind of jump into things. And as we say, well, I don't know if this is an English expression or a Spanish expression or whatever, but you end up kind of putting the carriage before the horse, where you don't have sort of the groundwork running and set up, and you're trying to immediately jump into the deep end, right? And you're trying to do everything at once, and it's things take time, you know. And I've been working a lot with patients, but in terms of imposter syndrome and identifying whether or not it's really truly a feeling of an imposter or it's a feeling of like I'm not quite ready yet, I always say that only a true, you know, a true imposter is going to be like just not even thinking about it at all, right? So like you've got to have this spark of like, okay, if I were to go and do this and just try it out, that is completely necessary, right? Like at some point you cannot prepare yourself for what you have not yet experienced. It's impossible, right? You must go and you must experience it. And so once you get in there and you experience it, that's when you're able to then enter your refinement era. And I feel like right now in the last year and a half to 2 years, I've been in my refinement era of like, okay, I've done it, right? Like I can turn on the microphone now and I can speak and, you know, I can post things and I can share my voice. And but now I want to see how that's actually coming out, right? I'm not it's sometimes tempting to just throw something out into the world and then turn sort of a blind eye to it and like, oh, I don't want to see it, you know, or I don't want to hear it, or I don't want to, you know, I don't want to see it anymore. Like it's out there, I did it, I did the thing, like, like I made it, right? I made it through imposter syndrome. And it's like, not really, because now you got to look the thing in the eye, like look at what you've created, look at how it's going, how you could maybe deliver your message with more clarity, how you can refine from there. So that's kind of my take on imposter syndrome.
I love what you shared about like I love that how you describe some sort of like the curve of growth. Like basically it's like it's so hard to get started, but when you actually go past the fear, you're more into like, okay, I feel more comfortable with not being perfect, and then I can look at what I've done and then refine it and then maybe get better and better. I personally like, I'm not gonna say where I am now, I still experience the same feelings as when completely started, but I still have the thing where I'm like, okay, it doesn't look perfect, but I'll still put it out there because I know that if I don't turn my intention into an action, nothing's ever gonna happen.
Totally. And I think that that's a huge gray area, right? It's you can't get so perfectionistic with what you're putting out there that nothing ever goes out. The other day, I was making an episode on doubt, and I literally doubted my episode on doubt so much that nothing came out, you know? So, and I didn't create an episode that week until the following week, because I really wanted it to be good. And I wanted it to capture the feelings that I was having. And you know, that's okay. Like, it's okay if I don't have an episode every week, but that can't go on for multiple weeks, week after week, and never creating an episode, right? So, and it's interesting how I feel like as humans, we really struggle with that gray area. It's kind of like it's all or it's nothing. It's like we're turning out our work every single day without fail, doesn't matter how it is, or we're too shy to do it at all, or we're afraid we'll fall away from our work and we'll never return. And we have a little bit of that difficulty finding some refinement. I'm doing hand gestures and I know we're not on video, so I need to I need to stop that. I'm always speaking with my hands. But yeah, kind of just imagining that wave, like that cyclical wave and riding that wave and trusting it. And yeah, because you make a good point, right? We can't be so caught up in our refinement era that nothing comes out. And I too am very guilty of that at times, multiple times.
Yeah, and you know, like when you're in this refinement phase, you're kind of seeking perfection. And perfection, as we all know, is an illusion. Perfection does not exist. I mean, you've probably experienced that where you wake up, you're in such a good mood, and everything, like, even though it's not perfect, it's still good. And then you wake up the next day, you're like, it looks like shit. Like, I don't want to have that out there. Yesterday, it looked amazing. So, do you have like tools or like practices or stuff that you do to not listen to that voice that comes up on bad days? I like to, like, I'm also doing gestures with my fingers of like bad days are not really bad days, but part of the process. Like when you have days where you don't feel confident or you don't really trust the content that you've done, how do you know if it's fear that is talking or if it's an actual questioning of the quality of the work that you've done?
So I feel like again it's neither just one or the other. It's not like I think it can be tempting to blame away, like, oh, the algorithm, right? Or like, oh, my lighting wasn't good or my hook wasn't good or whatever. And truthfully, I don't think about a lot of those things a lot. I'm trying to think about them more because I do think that the reason why things like that are important, and I know this goes a little bit away from the question, but I'll get back to it, is because when I truly believe in the quality of the message that I'm delivering, I want to give it its best shot to go out into the world and to, I want to give it all that I can to hopefully, go out there and reach whoever it needs to reach. And so for me, it's been a big understanding of my pride and my kind of like willingness to fail. I think for a long time I did not understand that I could not achieve success and I could not share my voice and I could not put myself out there, uh, without failing. Like I really was trying to avoid the hard fail moments. And within the even like the last couple months, I feel like I've just gained a sort of immunity to that finally. And it's sometimes for certain people, they don't really care and they don't have it hit as heavy. But for me, it's always been really important to me. I've always been somebody who like cares a lot about their grades and cares a lot about like trying to do the best that I can. And um but when you get caught in that and you're always trying to have every single thing that you create be the absolute best, you're never going to feel like it hits the mark. And I don't believe, in this sense, like my pride around my creations can ever feel like it's good enough. Like it's never going to feel inwardly abundant because it's just that's what it is. It's a literal just searching for the lack. Like, oh, what could I have done better? What could have been better about this? Even after a massive success, that same exact feeling of like pride will come back in. And if the next thing you post, you don't love it as much or it doesn't do as well, you're like, oh, it was a fluke, right? My other success, it must have been a fluke. Um, but yeah, I would say the main way that I have been dealing with it, and truthfully, like this is coming from somebody that this is very difficult for me because I feel sometimes like heartbroken when I create something and I love it, I'll watch it on repeat, I'll listen to it on repeat, and I just feel like when it's not received or when I've kind of like shouted out into the void and I don't hear anything back, it's like I just like want to hang my head, it's frustrating. And then there's the voice that's like, "Well, you shouldn't feel frustrated. Just keep creating, right? Don't create." The Rick Rubin narrative enters and it's like, "Don't create for the audience, the audience doesn't know what they want," and all of this stuff. But I think just understanding that one, it's okay to want your things to your creations to improve and it's okay to want to hear back from people and that's only human and natural that you want that connection based on what you're putting out into the world. And at the same time, recognizing like uh, Cameron Rosen said this to me the other day. He's like, if you're expecting a shout back from the void, but you're only offering a whisper, that's probably not going to happen, right? So maybe you can work a little bit more, shout with a bit more energy, right, into the void, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I love what you said when you said the audience doesn't know what they want. It really hits me because when I started online, I was always like asking people like, what do you want? Like, how do you want it? And I had answers like literally everywhere. Like, if I were to listen to everyone, I'd be doing 1,000 things that like nothing would really feel or look even, you know what I mean, or aligned. And then something that I've started doing and then recommending people to do is to actually do whatever you want to do the way you want to do it, because the right people will hear that message that you want to deliver the way you want to deliver it. Because it's the same, like if you're always like trying to copy someone that have succeeded or that you felt inspired by, you can try as much as you want. It might never work the same because it didn't come from you really, and people want you. And that's so true. People doesn't really know what they want from you. You gotta show to them what you can give to them, and then they'll know, oh, okay, now it makes sense. I love that.
I completely agree, and I think that trying to follow the feedback from everybody, or even if there are fellow yoga instructors listening, right? You've probably received all kinds of feedback that basically contradicts itself. Music too loud, music too quiet, not enough cues, too many cues. Like you'll receive that sort of contradicting feedback constantly. And I think that it's really important on the subject of feedback that you think about who you take feedback from. And somebody very wise, I literally cannot remember who, but I heard it on a podcast somewhere. This is why I love podcasts. You just never know the things you pick up, right? But they said something to the effect of only take advice from people who are where you want to be or who are being a way that you want to be in the world. And the only one I would add to that is if you are teaching somebody and they are the kind of student that you want to teach and that that you want to help, then yes, take that feedback from that student as well. But from other people who are not where you want to be, who are not living a life that looks like something you would want, but are supposedly even an area expert, I don't take advice from that because the way that we do one thing in our lives is the way that we do everything. And I don't want to be weighed down by that extra advice and that extra feedback because, especially those of us who have a tendency to doubt ourselves. And I have historically been a self doubt girly. Like I've had to work through a lot of that as we were just talking about. So, yeah, I think that that subject of taking feedback is really important as well because you want to be developing a level of self awareness and understanding of what's really going on and what you're putting out into the world and how it's being perceived, but also understand that a lot of times people's reaction to it has not as much to do with you as it has to do with them and how they're feeling that day.
Yeah, and I feel, like it's accepting that you're not going to be liked by everyone and that not everyone's going to love your classes, and it's okay because you cannot be loved by everyone, whether it's on your job or in your personal life. That's exactly the same motto because, like we always strive for more, and that's why, like, we always want to please everyone. But when we do so, especially in the work field, then we tend to lose ourselves because if you're trying to content or to please someone that doesn't meet with exactly like the message that you want to give, then you're just losing yourself along the way. I want to ask you, that's a really big question, but like how did you come up with the idea of doing a podcast? Like where was the roots of it all? Like did you start it with the idea, okay, like I want to do a podcast, but I don't know what I want to talk about? Or was that the opposite? I know exactly what I want to talk about, but I need to think of the right format to do so.
So there were two sparks. There was the spark to start the podcast, and then there was the spark of the actual name and the subject matter. And I will tell you that the spark to start the podcast came way before the decision of the name. And I actually bought a microphone on like a late night whim with one of my best friends who now has her own podcast and she does yoga nidra. It's beautiful. But I let that microphone sit and collect dust for like an entire year without really taking any action on it. But truthfully, the reason why I even wanted to start a podcast is because I was very inspired and very influenced by other podcasters I was listening to at the time. And I had given this graduation speech when I was in high school. So, when I was like 18 years old, I think it was. And I remember that I was so terrified to give this speech, but for some reason I felt like I had to do it. I like just felt this un it was a pretty much for me like an insane draw towards wanting to give this speech. And I went through with it. I got the speech all done and I memorized it because I was like, I cannot fail, This is going to be 1,000 people watching. Like, I cannot fail at this speech. And I gave the speech and everything went well. And people gave me incredible compliments at that time, just some of the nicest things that people had ever given me in terms of feedback in my entire life after that speech. But even so, I refused to listen to the speech. I was just so certain that I was not gonna like it, or that it really wasn't actually that good and people were just being nice, or that I would be embarrassed, or, all the things. And this went on for like 5 years, 5 or 6 years that I would not listen to the speech, and I knew there was a recording. And then finally one day I was like, "All right, I'm curious, like enough time has passed now. I don't really care how it sounds." And I listened to the speech and I was like, "This is really good. Like I should have a podcast." Like, I'm enjoying, I'm feeling motivated by this speech that I gave. And so that was kind of the initial spark of starting the podcast. And what pulled me out of the rut of letting the microphone collect dust was in part deciding to do something solo. And this is a really interesting one because I have since collaborated with the same friend, and it's nothing against her or anything, right? So we work really well together, but sometimes when you're trying to get a big project off the ground, cut off the things that are weighing you down, right? If you're having to coordinate your schedule with somebody else's and like go through multiple steps, and like it's just going to weigh you down. And I was able to like take the first steps in the weird hours of the night, as we were talking about before this podcast. Like sometimes I'm inspired at 11 p.m. Great, then I can record at 11 p.m. if I want to. And yeah, so I was able to take that decision that I was going to start to record on my own. And then the subject of leadership and yoga, it actually came to me when I was in Puerto Rico. I was living down there. We were actually like on a one-way ticket attempting to live there forever. And for basically reasons of unalignment, we didn't end up staying. But while I was there, I had a couple conversations with some leadership coaches, and I've always been reading a ton of leadership books from back when I worked on the business side of law firms. And so this word and this theme of leadership was there. And when I went home from Puerto Rico, I had this really terrible experience of what I will call just poor leadership, just bad leadership within the yoga world. And I remember feeling like, "Oh, if only they would read this book," you know? And I'm not saying I'm perfect either. Like I also need all the leadership books, right? But I remember in this moment feeling like this is such bad leadership, Like this really is hurtful and this is frustrating for me to see. And then I realized I'm like, I want us yoga teachers to learn from these leadership principles, and I want the people who are in charge of leading the world and, CEOs, uh, even presidents, right? Wouldn't that be incredible? World leaders to learn from the yoga. So, more leadership in yoga and more yoga in leadership. And I was like, leadership and yoga. That's what it's going to be. So, that's the story.
I love that. And I feel like it's actually like we can hear leadership and yoga as two opposites, but we can also read that as one that actually complement the other. actually so perfectly. How do you define leadership, and would you call yourself a leader? Because I think, it can be such a broad like word and topic, and especially if we pull that to the yoga world. So how would you explain to someone what leadership is and what it is to actually be a leader?
Yeah. So my definition of a leader is somebody who takes more accountability than anybody else. It's the person who, even if there's somebody further down, like let's just look at the classic example of like a corporate example. If there's a CEO and but somewhere down the line, like I'm working underneath him, right? I worked as a basically kind of like an executive assistant, admin assistant role. And if I majorly mess something up, what this leader would do, because he was a really good leader, is that he would be taking accountability for that and say, no, no, like I dropped the ball on explaining this to you better. I should have made sure that what I needed from you was clear. And what that does in that moment is it makes me also want to take accountability, because all of a sudden I'm like, oh, no, no, no. Like it wasn't you, it's really me. I should have also been more aware of when the deadline was or whatever. And so I love that this idea of taking accountability as a leader, because I think that when you take ultimate accountability and you're not blaming, you're just fully in your power. And this doesn't mean that you should think that things that are not your fault are your fault. Like I'm not insinuating that. I'm just saying within your life, understanding and leading yourself even, right? Like leadership is a skill of influence, and the first person we need to be able to influence is ourself. So if we're feeling like we're having a couple of, crappy days and crappy weeks back to back, and we're like, oh, it's just the weather sucks, or my friend group is just really getting me down, or at work, I keep getting, put with this person who has negative energy. And at a certain point, all of that is true, but you can also step up, take accountability for every part of that you can, and bring your absolute best. So that's how I would explain leadership. And I feel like there was a second part to that question that I've now forgotten.
But I'll get back to this. But I was basically asking you if you think you're a leader, or
Yeah.
like if you have like tools or like practices that help you become a better leader. But before you answered that question, as you were like defining leadership, I was like, okay, so being a leader is actually being your own cheerleader, kind of.
Mm. Yeah,
You
I
know?
like that.
Because I feel
Yeah.
like, but also like the way I feel, and I think we're quite similar when it comes to like when you want to start a project that is yours, where you feel like fully aligned, you feel that everyone else is kind of weighing you down. Because I feel, and you're going to answer that question right after, that you are a leader, like a native leader. And so for you, it's easier to work on your own because you can have that self-discipline. But I know that for a lot of people, they actually would need someone like you or someone like me to have them motivated. I know like my friends are always, can I come work next to you? Because like you're always so focused on your work that I know that I'm going to stay focused. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm definitely the catalyst friend. I'm the one that's like, "You wanna do it? Let's do it now. Let's go for it. What's holding you back? Let's start it now. Open the LLC, buy the plane ticket," right? Um, but that also comes with, I think, on like the shadow side of that is a lot of impatience. And I do actually really struggle on setting up systems for myself and doing kind of like the organizational side of things, I guess you could say. So, I believe that we are all a leader. And I know that that sounds like really cheesy, but I really do believe that we should all be in some way, some form, understanding that you are influencing everybody around you, even if it's just a child or a dog or something like that. Like the way that you're just going throughout the world and your life, you are inevitably influencing people. And one of my favorite facts is that there are within 3 degrees of us, 1,000 people. And so 3 degrees of us would be like 1 degree is you to your friend, 2 degrees would be you to your friend's partner. The final degree of that would be you to your friend's partner's coworker, right? Every people within that 3 degrees of you are influenced by things that you share, the, music that you share, a book that you share, things like that. That stuff spreads really far. So, yeah, I believe everybody's a leader. I feel like it's interesting. I go back and forth on my own understanding of like what how much of a leader I want to be. Like, do I want to be a publicly facing leader? Like, is that natural? Like, would I rather just be writing things behind the scenes? Like, what do I really want, you know? But absolutely some part of me, because there is like a deep discomfort and fear, I feel like in a lot of ways around standing up in front of a room of people, even in teaching yoga, that I get an adrenaline rush from it, and I also feel like there's something there for me. So, yes, I would consider myself a leader, and I would consider you, and I would consider you if you're listening as well.
Because that's very interesting. Also, like, I ask myself this question like almost every day. Like, what are you trying to understand? What are you chasing? Like, what's like, do you still have something to learn from what you're doing? Or because like I see you like interviewing a lot of people and having that like spark within to like keep like interviewing more people. Either like I would say either a vision to where you want to bring the podcast, or do you feel like because you're in this process of like healing yourself, or you're still like seeking answers, or like where are you taking the podcast or the project to?
It's multiple things. I definitely feel like the project is moving away from less yoga specific and to more broad discussions. If you were to ask me who are my dream guests, I would love to interview Joe Dispenza, Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys, Jay Balvin, who has a really incredible mindfulness based uh, teachings that he includes along with his fame, that he doesn't have to include. So people like that who may not be like yogis in terms of practicing the asana of yoga, but they have a very yogic way of being about them, essentially. But the vision and where I'm taking the podcast and why I feel the urge to continue is also because I feel like getting back to what I said at the very beginning of the episode when I shared a little bit about my mission and that this idea that your dreams are for people like you. I think that a lot of times we believe that being in the media, right, or doing these sort of things is reserved for the elite, or it's reserved for, you could say anything about it, somebody who has a different aesthetic or somebody who is XYZ different than I am. And one of the main reasons why I want to prove that you can do this, right? That you can kind of start from the bottom up in the podcast world, because that's what I've done. A lot of people come to podcasting who have already created an audience or have a platform for themselves, which is beautiful. And that's wonderful. And that's never been my experience. So I don't know what that's like. And I find that a lot of people get really discouraged, like, oh, I can't start the podcast until I have a platform or until I have people who care to listen. And my first month, the entire first month of my podcast, even though I shared about it on social media, I had 12 subscribers. 12. And like two of them were definitely my mom and dad. you know? So like it really started from zero. Like really, really started from zero. And I I've experienced a lot of growth in it. And it's especially the last couple months been picking up pace. I feel like I'm always saying that because you always see a little bit more like, okay, the thing is starting to have life of its own, and I wanna take that to the moon, you know? Like, I wanna take that all the way up just because I want people to see that it can be done and kind of, like, document my process as well because I feel like, pretty openly and pretty genuinely on my podcast about, like, the struggle and the yeah, the difficulty of it because it's definitely not easy. Um, but I think that more than just to prove a point like, "Aha, like, look, I made it," you know, "I'm signed by a podcast network," or "I've created my own podcast network," or all these things that really do excite me, and I know that I will do. It's also to say, like, if I can do it, you can too, you know? Um, you can also start from 0. It's really possible, even though it doesn't seem like it. So that would be, I would say, a big driving force behind continuing with the podcast as well.
I read a quote, like I think it was a while ago, but I always go back to this quote, which is when you allow yourself to fail, when you allow yourself to be a student to the world, then you also allow others to fail, to be vulnerable, and to be a student and to start from scratch. So that's what like we always say on social media. It's also good to share the downs, the depth, and all of the things that come with the process of starting your own business or like being a single mom, you know, all of those situations where it could look so perfect and easy unless you allow yourself to be vulnerable so that others can also feel vulnerable. And when you're a relatable person, then people feel inspired and they feel like they're actually lifted. Who is the person that would inspire you the most? Either it's because this person does exactly what you do, or you were talking about Joe Dispenza, for instance, that seemed like to be the like the ideal person you'd love to have in your podcast. But do you have like someone you actually look up to in this like podcast kind of process?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say that in terms of influence, I'm most influenced and really learned from, although I've never met him in person yet, but Richard Rudd from the Gene Keys. And you can listen, there are so many things by Richard Rudd that you can listen to on YouTube and wherever, and interviews. And I highly recommend that, you know, you listen to him if you want to know like more of a background of the kind of things that I tune into, like because they move me and they change the way that I think and the way that I feel in such a magnetic, such a powerful way, and also an empowering way. But who I look up to, so number 1, she only creates in Spanish, so she does speak English, but, her name is Dani Schultz, and she has a podcast called Viene y Va, and that is, like, one of the only podcasts that I just listen to every single episode. You know, I'm, like, way back now, I'm, like, in 2021, back when the quality was lower, but I don't even care, I'm just there, like, eating it all up, and I think that what I enjoy about listening to her is a lot of the same qualities that I try to foster, which is that she's sharing value and not just fluff, but she's also sharing personal stories and things that make me feel like I can really know her. And it brings out that same sense of power within me that I hope to bring to others. And also, I get to practice my Spanish because I'm always learning new vocabulary, and I literally feel myself using words that I know I'm like, oh, I learned that word from Dani like yesterday. And look at me now, I'm putting it into words or into practice when I speak with my husband at home. He's Venezuelan, so we speak Spanish sometimes at home. But yeah, I would definitely say that she's the only one that I would point to specifically in terms of the podcast world, and I think that the business that she's built and the courses that she runs, I've taken a couple of them, and I love when you, you kind of, like, peek behind the curtain and you get that real look into, like, how this person is live, and you're just even more blown away and you're even more impressed than you expect it to be, and she's definitely one of those people who lives up to that standard, which I really respect.
Would you love to have your podcast like become in person at some point, like doing some sort of a tour and being able to actually interview people in person and like to have like an audience like right like sitting in front of you and actually listening to you?
Of course. Yeah. Yeah, having a podcast tour, I mean, all that stuff is the absolute dream. Bringing together guests, as you know, people like you that I've interviewed that have really lit some special spark within me and within listeners altogether. I mean, that's the ultimate vision. And I think we've seen it done a lot in different cases, but to have it be done in an entertaining way, but also in a way that really raises consciousness, that really stays true to the mission of wanting to bring people breakthroughs and to deliver something of actual value to them, because and that's one of my main missions as well within this whole industry is like we can make mindfulness cool, like mindfulness and can be mainstream and um yeah, so absolutely. Yes.
Mindfulness is so sexy now. I feel like
Yeah.
there's so many ways to invite people to take care of their mental health in a way that is like playful and uplifting. Do you have any, like, I don't know if these are hacks or tips or tools, um, to turn actually that intention of like either starting your own business project, whatever that is, or even just starting your own mindfulness morning routine, whatever? Like, could you give like advices to someone who wants to get started? Maybe three.
Yeah. I would say the number one is when you feel yourself kind of getting fired up about the possibility of a goal or starting a new routine, do not leave the sight of that goal without taking one tiny little action. And I believe that's a lesson that I've learned from Tony Robbins in one of his tapes at some point, but that's really key. And to give you an example, I've wanted to organize things a little bit more in my house because as I said, I'm not the most, systems organized person. And I kept putting it off and being like, oh, I've got to devote like multiple hours to this. And then I realized I'm like, I'm not even following my own advice. Like, just do one drawer. So I just did my yoga tops drawer and I, finally put them like in the rolled up manner that I wanted to do organized. And I've been doing just like one drawer or like one area of the cupboard or like one corner, just like bit by bit, piece by piece. And it feels really nice, right? Because then you go like, it's okay. Like I have made a little bit of progress. It's not just all or nothing, like suddenly devoting yourself entirely to this new goal or this new dream, because a lot of times A, that's not possible for people because of other responsibilities, or B, you will burn yourself out, right? And what I do believe though, I guess my second tip would be that once you have sort of created these little initial first steps, right? You've got the ball rolling, like that little bit of momentum in the middle. Then you start to have to, if you really want to make a big change, you do have to eventually set aside other things, set aside other distractions, and pour all of your energy into that thing to like really get it up and going. I think about this with handstands. There are times that I don't do a handstand for like, I don't know, a couple of days or something like that. Generally speaking, I practice them a lot, but I can take a week off. I took a month off actually last year entirely off of handstands. And when I came back to it, I was able to just kick up and no issues, caught the first one. But there was a time when I had to dedicate all of my energy and all of my attention to really making big steps forward on that handstand journey to get to the point where I am now. And now I can be a little bit more relaxed with it. And I love this I guess phrase or kind of analogy that my friend Brandon Bergato gave me once, which is that if you've got a bunch of like house plants, imagine, but you only have like a certain amount of water and you're just giving like a little teeny bit of water to each of the house plants, none of them are going to be thriving. So at a certain point, you have to make the decision to like pour more of your water and your resources into one plant if you actually want to see it grow. And I think that that's difficult, right? Because we're multi-passionate beings. We want to do lots of different things, but um, yeah, once you get that spark and you say like, okay, yes, this is a goal or a dream that I'm gonna take little steps towards, and then you take a couple of those steps and you're like, ooh, I want more, like I really want to do this. Don't be afraid to be unbalanced in that moment and pour a little bit more of yourself into it. Stay up late working on that dream project, right? Um, Not forever, but for a period of time. And let yourself be fully committed to it. I know that was only 2 tips, but I think that's all I got.
It's so interesting how hard it can be sometimes to prioritize even the thing that we love or want the most, because we always feel like we're leaving something behind. But when it comes to handstand or like the yoga practice, for instance, and that's something that I've learned over time because I've been practicing for like 8 years, you cannot be all in the whole time. It is not sustainable. But I'm just like you. I am an overachiever. I am a perfectionist. I am very impassioned. I want it all and I want it all like at the top. But I feel like you are only like taking yourself to the burnout. But as you were saying, like I feel like you have to go through that imbalance phase where you're giving a little bit more to one. Would would you see that actually moving towards more balanced? Like, because if you're giving more water to something that is actually setting your soul on fire and accepting to actually let go of something that does not belong to your present self, like sometimes you are so attached to a past version of ourselves that we kind of like stay attached to it for such a long time until we realize it's just weighing us down, it's weighing our growth down. And then when we start to actually let go, to give more time and energy to, for instance, the podcast for you, then that's where you're actually blooming.
Yeah, it's bringing you like what society's vision of balanced is for you is not necessarily like bringing yourself into balance in terms of alignment as you said. So yeah, sometimes it is good if in the process of watering the plants that most matter, a few of the other ones die off. Like that's okay. Yeah, I love that way of thinking about it.
And also that everything is so impermanent. Like maybe now you want to give so much time and energy to this, and then tomorrow is going to give birth to another plant, and then you'll want to nurture that new plant.
And there's another thing here that I will say because I get asked a lot too in terms of this conversation of, oh, that I find that I'm following my passions, but my passions just jump, like you said, like very quickly. And sometimes that's good. And we should have that evolution, right? Like, thank goodness that my interest in yoga changed over. I mean, I'm still interested in yoga, of course, but it led me to being interested in podcasting. I'm so thankful for that. And I'm so thankful that that change occurred within me. But what happens when we're feeling like we're one day pouring all of our water into one plant and then the next day we do it again, but then the day after that we want to change to another plant, and then like next week it's another plant. And that sense of like kind of shiny object syndrome that I call it, where you like hear about a new fad or a new routine and you're like, "Oh yeah, like that's it. Like that's the one." And you keep changing and changing and changing. And I think that there comes a point where you must remember that initial spark, with podcasting as the example. There are days, like even yesterday, it was so hard for me to record my solo episode. Right now, I'm feeling great. Like this is easy. This is a piece of cake. I'm having a great time. But yesterday I was not having a great time with it. And there are times that we must choose to continue beyond when it's fun. we must really have that sense of dedication, and it's another gray area because you don't wanna be there banging your head against the wall, like, every day is torture, you know? But in order to get through to those breakthroughs and these incredible moments, we have to continue watering the plant beyond when it's fun on some days. Some days are gonna feel rather bland, and you feel a little bit bored with the thing that you're working on, and that's not a reason to step aside or set it aside, I should say. That's not at all a good enough reason a lot of times. So, I hope that that makes sense, but I think it's important.
Yeah, I'm also like someone who lives a lot in the extreme, so it's either white or black. And when I
Yes.
experience a day where I'm like, I'm tired, like I don't feel like I have the spark, I don't feel creative, I don't have any ideas, and I'm like, maybe I made a mistake, maybe that was not it, maybe I should just leave that on the side and just change life, like move in a different country and all of the things. What advice would you give to someone who thinks that she's actually failing because she's changing, or because she feels like, it's always hard. It's the same question, some sort of the same question that I asked you at the beginning of the episode. How do you know? Is it the fear that is speaking, or the fatigue, or is it the actual like intuition or inner call that is telling you, okay, you need to change?
It's really hard because I think that at the end of the day, whatever you believe about it will be true. Like, if you believe that you're just burned out and you need a little refresher, a little vacation, and come back to it, that's gonna be what's gonna work for you. And if you believe that, like, over and over, you're just having this, like, sinking feeling and you just keep ingraining the belief, like, "I'm going down the wrong path, I'm going down the wrong path," yeah, it is going to be the wrong path for you. And I know that's a really weird answer and kind of a hard one sometimes to wrap our brains around, but, that's where it's important, the intention and coming back to your intention, like, "Is this something that's really important to me, and do I wanna continue with it?" But setting that aside, the part about the beliefs and, like, creating our reality, because I know that's a little bit kind of into the weeds, but setting that aside, I like to think about following what gives us most energy, right? So if I am gonna stay working on my podcast, even on the days that feel a little bit bland and feel a little bit boring, and I don't feel like as much like I have the spark or the desire to continue, I'm gonna look for what within the project brings me most energy. Is it reaching out to guests? That sounds like okay. Is it drafting new ideas or brainstorming new ideas? Like, no, because I don't really feel creative. Is it thinking about how I could totally reinvent and do a new type of solo episode? That sounds pretty good, right? Because I'm craving change. Like, and so you start to navigate through, and that's kind of what happened with me recently. I've been doing episodes where I add music and sound effects that came out of a moment where I felt bored with my product, and I felt uninspired by my creation. And so sometimes it can be just a matter of keeping your attention within the intention that you have, right? And not letting it like run wild to like, oh, I'm having this one day of boredom. Like maybe I should question my entire life path and like change countries and change jobs and like change friend circle. Like we sort of jump to these wild conclusions just because we're not feeling energy towards something. So find and follow what does have just a little bit more energy than you're currently feeling. Like what feels like just a little bit better than continuing with the status quo.
Yeah, sometimes, it's same as a relationship, or like with a partner,
Yes.
for instance, you need to bring the passion back, and it doesn't have to be such like a drastic
Yeah.
change in the relationship or in your life. It can just be like changing a little bit of perspective, or the way you approach your relationship, your job, your project, and just adding or changing or modifying something, and it makes it just new again?
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think too, sometimes I find that I think there's so many problems in something, whether it's a project or a relationship. And what I'm actually sensing is my internal chaos, because a lot of times what we see in other people or what things that we fear or we like blame or we feel suspicious towards the world and other people is because we're suspicious of ourselves in that way. And taking a moment to have 3 deep rounds of breath and take an actual pause and come back to it, I think sometimes we see things that we might otherwise completely miss. We're brought back a little bit to the magic. Um, yeah, and all of that stuff, like it's not a one-way street, it's definitely a two-way street. The energy that you're bringing to the person or the project is reflected back to you.
Do you have a daily ritual or like a weekly ritual check-in? Like how do you actually connect, all those questions that you ask yourself? When or how do they come up?
My daily practice that I've been really working with over the past, I will say close to a year, has been that pause. And I don't know why, because this is the simplest thing in the world. And I feel like we're told this in a bunch of different ways, but it was finally explained to me in a way that made sense, where it's like every time that I feel like I've lost a little bit of awareness of what I'm doing and kind of going through the motions or rushing around and being a little bit too quick, whether it's like cooking dinner and I'm just like chopping things quickly. It's like, why do I need to be going fast? Why do I need to be rushing through this? Is to take 3 deep rounds of breath and try to focus on nothing else besides the breath in those moments. And noticing how those pauses make you feel like you have so much more time by slowing down. It's remarkable. Um, but yes, I write. I don't journal about my like, oh, today I did blah 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 sort of journaling like of a narrative of my days anymore. I do keep a running green light list, which is basically all of the beautiful synchronicities or fun conversations or meeting a new friend or something really nice that somebody commented on my TikTok. And those I do try to keep, and at the end of the day, like, scan my brain for them. Okay, what were these green light moments? Because every day, no matter how, like, crappy of a day, there are there are hundreds of green lights for all of us. Like, I ate a warm meal, I enjoyed the coziness of my blankets when I laid down at the end of the day, whatever. Sometimes they're massive green lights, but that's, I would say, the pausing and then that reflection and that expression of writing. Most of the things that I write actually now, I do share directly out with the world somehow, some way, but they're usually about my feelings. Plot twist, right? They're usually about my feelings, but said in a way that is mm, not just journaling anymore for me.
What is the one piece of advice you would give to your younger self now that you know?
When I think about my younger self, I think there were a lot of things that I did know and I did understand when I go back and I read, because I actually started journaling and like writing little pieces of poetry and stuff like that when I was in middle school. And it's funny because sometimes I'll go back and I'll read things and I'm like, "Oh, wow, like, I knew that back then, and I, like, totally fell away from all of this understanding, it's crazy." But overall, I view myself in those times as really quite timid and really, really dramatically self-critical, and just really everything is heavy and everything is, the end of the world, and it's just everything is dramatic and intense. And I would just go back and be like, "Stretch your shoulders back, proud chest, go out into the world with a little bit more confidence, even if it makes you feel uncomfortable, because that will become a state that's more natural for you with time."
What we used to be very uncomfortable has become much more comfortable over time, for sure.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to show up as the most confident version of you, whilst you're not confident
Yes.
at all. It's just so challenging. You feel like you're just a fake person out there.
Yes. Totally.
And I'd like to finish that episode with a very last question. If I come up to you or anyone that is listening come up to you and is like, look, Shawna, I really want to start this project. I really want to start as an online coach or online yoga teacher, or I even want to start my own podcast. But I'm feeling so scared to fail and I don't know where to start. What is the first thing that I need to do right now to get started?
The very, very first thing. Hmm. Let yourself daydream a little bit. Like, just let the idea simmer. Just, like, let it naturally keep coming up to you. Write down the parts of it that you feel excited about that you don't wanna forget. That's a really big one. We think we'll remember things and ideas and sparks, and we don't always. But also, I wouldn't put too much pressure on it right in the beginning, right? I feel like it's like if you're trying to start a little fire, and the way to start the fire, we all know, right? When you have a little bit, you lean in, you go like, you just blow on it a little bit. You don't blow like you're gonna blow out a candle and blow the entire flame out, right? Because sometimes I think when we put so much pressure on it right away, it hasn't really had time to develop and it can kinda stamp it out. Um, but yeah, I think it's a very, that whole process of how ideas and dreams and stuff like that arrive to us, I think it's a very magical process more than we give it credit, and I think that we should be super aware what we're choosing to put our energy into and what we're choosing to give our attention and our intention. And some ideas can be good ideas, but they might not be the exact one, right? And at a certain point, yes, you must step forward and figure out if it's for you or not. But yeah, I would say like let yourself embrace the magic and kind of understand like this romance that you're having with this idea or this dream and your this fantasy, right? That you're starting to think about because in those early moments when you have no expectation and you have no demands yet on this thing, you can actually be very very powerful in the way that you'll start to attract people into your life who have done a similar thing, who can help you. You'll start to see signs, you'll start to feel the momentum grow naturally and just keep your eye out for that and let it be reason and proof to continue.
Learning to live in the in between and enjoying that floating moment that comes between the idea and like the intention that will turn into an action, but taking that time to really reflect on how you envision the thing before you actually give birth to it. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Shawna. It's always so inspiring to discuss with you. I'm so happy we could have that happen, especially that I can now get to know you much better and know your process much better. I hope it will inspire everyone who has listened to actually get started. Thank you, Shawna.